Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark TV. You guys know who I am. I'm Dr. Angela Butchester, and I'm so glad to have you here on Daily Spark TV. And well, you know what I like to do? I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, I know that we are in for a treat today because my guest is Michael Cumiskey, and we're talking about his book, An Undiscovered Country. So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me today on Daily Spark TV.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. I love spending time with my guests that are able to share not only about their book, but about their wisdom along the way. So I can't wait to pick your brain. Now, before we get started about your book, there may be a few people out there that are unfamiliar with who you are. So can you tell us just a little bit about who you are? What makes you, you?
Well, I spent a number of years as a teacher in all sorts of levels, from primary schools to universities. I ended my career as head teacher of a comprehensive school. So my interest has been in education largely. But some years ago, I was awarded a fellowship to the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. And it was whilst I was there that I began writing. And the writing was inspired to some large extent by having to come to terms with a very different culture. And most of my books are involved with that, or to some extent consider the business of a different culture and having to come to terms with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, being an author, is that something, I know that many times people like to write. Nowadays, you're able to share our ventures on blogs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to be an author. So my question to you is being an author something that you've always wanted to do?
It's always been in the back of my mind. And now I've written 6 books published. And the one that we're talking about today concerns the troubles in Ireland, which of course is close to where I live. And my father was part Irish, so I have an interest.
Now, I cannot wait to talk to you about your book. And believe you me, we're definitely going to give you time to talk about that. But I want to ask you about the title of your book, An Undiscovered Country. I find that title to be quite curious. Can you explain to us why were those words appropriate for your book?
Well, it's a quote from Hamlet, from I think the 3rd scene in Hamlet. It's mentioned, and he refers to it as something to do with being dead, that it's to do with another life. I thought of it as another life in terms of people moving from Northern Ireland to England during the Troubles.
I love that answer. And that is something that I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of. Now, my grandmother's family is from that neck of the woods. So we were definitely have been told about the stories, but you know, it's not something that we learn a lot about here in the States, simply because it's another country's history, but it is quite fascinating. Now, I have to agree with you on how we look at words and how words can have a special meaning to you according to one's experiences. I love that. Now, you were touching on how this has a particular meaning between you and your father. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, my father's family were from Cork. But it only makes a complicated situation even more complicated, because my mother's family were from Italy. So I'm a bit of a mongrel in more ways than one. I've always had an interest in Ireland because of its proximity and because of the troubles across there, which have always seemed peculiar as far as I'm concerned, because they're religious rather than anything else. And the story that I chose to tell is about a family that move from Northern Ireland to England, but during which the children of that family are penalized in all sorts of different ways. And that really is the nub of the story, following the development of Lorna, the eldest girl, and how she is treated and why she's treated like that.
Now, of course, I say this very much on radio, and it's good for TV as well. And that is, I'm going to ask you some questions, but viewers, if you want to know how the story ends, you have to buy the book. But I want to ask you about that main character. Why was it important to give the personality that you gave? Does that help us understand the story better? What was your thought there?
I think it does help. I think explaining about Lorna's background gives a clue to the fact that she was badly treated in all sorts of different ways, and sometimes by members of her own family, which is fairly typical of the situation. Moving to England was they imagined it would change the situation, but of course it didn't. And the difficulties that she experiences are really the nub of the story, and how that develops and how it concludes. She eventually reaches a situation where, after hospitalization, she finds some relief. And at least partly due to the fact that she finds a mate.
Oh yes, I can definitely understand how that can be a saving grace many times. I have found that as a counselor, many times people talk about that very thing, and how they wish that they simply had someone to share their life with. You know, the happies, you want someone to be able to share the happy times with, but you also want someone there that can definitely help you with some of those tough times as well. So I see how that is important. Now, my next question for you is dealing with your process. When you were writing, did you find that there was a particular time of day or a particular environment that you really needed in order to be productive during the writing stage?
It's never convenient. I always like to think that, yes, I have a special time when I write, but I don't really, if I'm honest. I write at all sorts of different times and in all different depths of concentration. It's very much up to the mood and the situation I find myself in. I'm being disarmingly honest as I tell you this, because I wouldn't normally admit to this. So I find myself writing in all sorts of odd situations. And as a consequence, I have all sorts of bits of paper and books that I've written in, which stack up all over the study. And I'm constantly referring to having lost a bit that I know about. So it's not an easy answer, I'm afraid. I write when the mood takes me. And to whatever degree of concentration I'm able to muster.
Now, I love your answer, and I thank you for your honesty. And I think that many authors or many aspiring authors need to be aware that there is no right or wrong way to be in the writing process. And when someone is successful and they have completed their process, it's always nice to hear their bits of wisdom, which is why I asked that question, because it does help someone know, thinking that I can only write in the morning or only write in the evening.
No, I write in all sorts of strange places, on buses, on the trains. Sometimes when I'm driving the car, I have to stop to jot something down in case I forget it. It's a continuous process.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. You've just given someone permission to be themselves. And I love it. I love it. Now, when you were done with the writing process and it is now time to make the decision of, do I self-publish or do I use a publishing house? Many people are stuck there. Do we leave it to the professionals or do you try to do it yourself, and whatever that means to each person? How did you go about the process of deciding to self-publish or to use a publishing house?
I've tried every which way, some with more success than others, some with abject failure, simply because no one attacks the same kind of importance to the writing as you do yourself. So that if it's put to a publisher, they have all sorts of other considerations to do with how well established you are already, how old you are, and questions like that. Whereas the self-publish is easy to achieve, but with a less likelihood of success, simply because it's self-published. So it's a quandary. And as I say, I've tried both methods with varying degrees of success in each.
Oh, I love your answer, because I find that you're right. Depending on the genre of the book, the experience of the author, the stages and phases of our lives, you are very much correct there. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever works for that particular author. I love it. I love it. Now, when you held, I know that you have authored other books, but when you held a copy, the first copy of this book in your hands, how did you feel in that moment?
I won the football pools. It was a tremendous feeling of success, quite unreasonably, if the truth is known. But tremendously feeling of success, that I've achieved something at last. And having been involved in the arts all my life to different degrees in different ways, this stood out as something quite important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that with everything that we do, we should be able to celebrate those steps along the way. I think it's amazing that each author that I have talked to, the one thing that I think most authors can agree on is that it was amazing to hold that first copy of the book in your hand.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Well, Michael, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
It's An Undiscovered Country, is the title. It can be obtained largely through Amazon, but it can be ordered through bookshops. And my contacts can be kept via the internet in all sorts of different ways.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Just wanted to take a few moments to wish you and your family an amazing autumn. It is during this time of the year that we start to take in the harvest. Well, Deuteronomy 11:14 reminds us that not only will God provide the rain, but He will provide the grain, the new wine, and the oil that we need in order to be sustained. So, as we start to gather with friends and family during this season, may you be reminded of all that God has done, is doing, and will continue to do in your life. So, from all of us here at Daily Spark TV, may you have an amazing harvest. And remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.
Hi, do you have something to share? Be a guest. Want to sponsor an episode? Visit drangela.chester.com. Thanks again for watching Daily Spark TV.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for our Daily Spark TV. You guys know who I am. I'm Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Michael Cumiskey, and we're talking about his book, An Undiscovered Country. Now, I love the fact that you are sharing this story with us today. And I love those stories that really the author has managed to take the reader along on the journey. With that being said, when you were writing, did you find that there was a particular theme or a particular message that you wanted to make sure the reader understood?
Well, as I mentioned before, much of my interest in writing focuses on the fact that I want to try and show the problems that people have when faced with new cultures, new situations, new habits, because sometimes that can be quite difficult to deal with. And all my books, to a certain extent, are involved with that kind of thinking. And really, that's the nub of it.
Now, do you think that the fact that you have been an educator, that you have worked in that field, that has helped you to explain to the masses, to take that reader along the journey, if you will? Do you think that has helped you craft the story in a way that it breaks it down for the average person to be able to understand better?
Undoubtedly. I think my time in education was the most valuable period of my life in many respects. And the experience that I gained there has certainly played a part in the way that I present my books. It has to.
I am a firm believer that there is no happenstance, that all of the things that we do have led up to this particular moment, and good or bad, that there are lessons in all that we do. And when we're able to extract that lesson and hold on to it, then we're able to become the best people that we can be. So I have to agree with you there. So my next question for you is, with the people that have influenced you as an author, you are now able to influence so many others, not only the readers, but those aspiring authors out there as well. Are there any particular writers, be it that they're famous or just locally known, that have inspired you along the way? Or was there a particular article that you've read in your life that really spurred you to say, yeah, being an author is definitely what I want to do?
Well, I'm very fond of a writer called Ian McEwan, who's written some very sensational type stuff, but well written. And I think that's the thing I admire most. I admire the technique of writing as much as I do the storyline. And he writes really well. And a number of others of the same sort of age group who write well. And that always leaves me admiring them, because there's so much bad writing about. Or perhaps that's just me being too critical, I don't know.
Well, I think many times as an educator, you do tend to look at things a certain way. I know that as hard as counselors and therapists are, we may notice things differently than other people do simply because of your education, your training, and you simply are who you are. So I think I understand exactly what you mean there. Now, as far as advice is concerned, I know that many of the aspiring authors that contact us, they love that I ask these questions of successful authors because you've been there, you've done that, and now you have that wisdom to share. Is there a bit of information that you wish you would have known when you were first starting out as an author and getting your books out there? Is there a bit of information you wish you would have known that you can share with our aspiring authors now?
The thing that I didn't know was how hard it would be to complete a book. I think that was the most important thing. I thought I could sit down and write it without any effort. And in fact, it doesn't work out like that. We're talking months, even up to years. And the tenacity necessary to continue is something that needs to be recognized.
I could not agree with you more. And I love how you put it, the tenacity to continue. I think that so many people now are expecting for the project that they are embarking upon to miraculously be complete overnight. People expect for a success to be overnight. And there are so many people, when you talk to them, so many successful people, when you talk to them, they said, yeah, overnight took me 10 years.
Yeah.
This book, this book took me 3 years to write. And you're right. There are some cases where it was a shorter period of time, but the majority of people, it has been through trial and error and through the patience of the years that they have gotten it right. Thank you for that bit of wisdom. Now, for someone who says, I like what this gentleman has to say, I want to pick up a copy of his book. There's sometimes an underlying message that someone may pick up from a book. Many books that I have read, it's talking about culture. It's talking about a journey from getting to point A to point B. But the underlying story is about perseverance, like you said. Do you feel that your book has an underlying message? I understand that it's about culture, but do you think that it's also an underlying message of perhaps encouragement as well?
Well, I was raised in a very religious home, a situation which has changed phenomenally as I've grown older. But I think some part of the message in my books is a one about morals. And it sounds old-fashioned, but perhaps I'm old-fashioned. I think it's important to understand what your moral standpoint is. It's not enough just to tell stories. The stories have got to have a moral import, I think.
I could not agree with you more. And as one author said it, and I love how he said it, I am of that particular vintage that agrees with you that we do need to have a sense of a moral compass about the things that we do. And perhaps it is becoming a little less in fashion to do that, but it doesn't mean that it's the incorrect thing to do. We do need to make sure that we are being our best selves and that we are representing ourselves well. So I have to agree with you there. Now, last few questions for you, and that is, I know that even though I am a faith-based show, many of the authors that I talk to don't necessarily write about faith, but I do like to ask them, how do you think that your faith has helped you become the person that you are today? Now, I always give it a qualifier. not asking if you attended church on Sunday or if you read scripture this morning, but just your overall life. How do you think your faith has played a part into who you are today?
I can't deny the importance it's played in my life. I mean, I was an altar boy at 4 years old, so I could read Latin as soon as I could read English. So it started very young. And I must admit, a lot of it I've rejected, but the essence of it, the moral aspect of it, I've maintained, I think. And I hope that comes through in the books.
Absolutely. And, thank you so much for being honest about that, because I find that as I speak to people, as we change and mature in our lives, so does our faith. And there are bits and pieces that we understand better. There are bits and pieces that perhaps, though important, they don't serve us the same. Those stories that are important to us in our 20s, and that direction is different in our 50s, and they're different when we get along into our 70s and plus years. So you are so right. But I love how God is always there with us, no matter what stage or phase of life we are in. He's always
Absolutely.
there with us. I love it. I love it. Well, Michael, I want to give you a minute or so just to share that bit of wisdom. No question in particular, other than if there is a message that you could share with our viewers today of encouragement or words of encouragement for our youth even, what would those words of inspiration or encouragement be?
The most important word in my vocabulary is tenacity. I think it's so important. I've done so many different things and in so many different countries. And the most important lesson I've always held is that tenacity has to be the most important aspect. You shouldn't ever give up. Too many people are disenchanted too soon and find that they don't have the tenacity to stick in there. And really, that's so important, because nothing is achieved unless you stick with it.
I love it. Such an appropriate and on mark comment. Thank you so much again for spending time with me here at Daily Spark TV. Thank you, Michael.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. And viewers, thank you for spending time with us here today as well. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best self. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you're blessed in the Lord.
Welcome to Daily Spark TV. Are you an author with a faith-based book? Be a guest. Serious about your product or service and want to try something new? Sponsor an episode. I see you're ready to get started. So visit drangela.chester.com. Thanks again for watching Daily Spark TV.